Dragging a little bit. There it goes. We're live. What's up, guys? What is up? Welcome back to another episode of the Deck Talk Podcast. Man, this episode I have been looking forward to. This is one guy that when I first started watching YouTube fishing, this is one of the very first guys that I have started to watch, and we are lucky to be able to have the Bearded Wander on the podcast with us. And but guys, if you don't know, I'm Colin Burnett.
That's right, Colin, and I am Norman Lee. But as always, we have some business to take care of first. We got to talk about our sponsor for tonight's episode. Tonight's episode is sponsored by Cornfield Fishing Gear. As technology continues to increase and grow each and every year, the expense you have in your electronics, well, just face facts, guys. They're pretty darn expensive. You don't cut corners when it comes to your graph, so why would you chance out on the brackets that support your units? Cornfield Fishing Gear, mounting equipment you can trust, rock solid engineering, safe and secure, giving you a peace of mind so you can focus more on fishing and less about the security of your investment. From the console to the bow, whether you run single units or multiple units, completely adjustable for every angle possible, giving you the best vantage point to optimize your view, whether you're at idle or at speed. With the age of real time fish finders, they also have a full array of transducer maps ranging from live, sweep, forward facing, live view, Mega 360, and a whole lot more. But one of my favorite features about Cornfield Fishing Gear, guys, is that they are made, produced, and manufactured 100% in the USA. Guys, we are telling you, these brackets are legit. Mounting equipment that secures your valuable investment as well as your peace of mind. For any questions on Cornfield Fishing Gear, you can message Colin at Colin Burnett Fishing, myself at Norman Lee Fishing, our Deck Talk Podcast website at decktalkpodcast.com, or by simply going to Cornfield's website at www.cornfieldfishinggear.com and make sure order yours today. Whew. All right, guys.
Man,
All right. That is, man, you're right. Colin, we have a great episode tonight, and both of us, man, have been looking forward to this guest for quite some time, ever since we got this dude locked on. But anyway, let's give him a proper big fish catching introduction. All right, our guest tonight, he is an all around accomplished angler and influential content creator, whether he's in Florida flipping up giant largemouth out of thick cover or on his home lake around East Tennessee catching smallies on small jigs out deep. It's his versatility that makes him stand out as one of the best. Host of the Alex Rudd Fishing Podcast, Fish Fear the Beard, the man himself, Alex Rudd.
I love
What's
it.
going on,
man,
brother?
I love it. Listen,
man.
I like that. I gotta have Norman. I'm getting Norman to follow me around and be my hype man. That's awesome. Yeah.
so, so guys, I mean, if you have not seen any videos of Alex on YouTube or on Facebook, Instagram, or anything like that, you need to get out from that rock that you are up underneath and enjoy life. So, but let's get it going, guys. And I want to kind of start off the beaten path that does not have nothing to do with fishing, but I want to know, Alex, what is your favorite movie quote?
Oh, favorite movie quote. Star Wars, Yoda, he says, and this is funny because like this is like one that like I don't know, it's like one of those. It's like not super inspirational, but it's a quote that I quoted a lot, and it's like I use this almost as like a reminder sometimes of like how life can be, which is like in Yoda says that fear leads to hate, hate or fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to the dark side of the force. And like that's one of those quotes that like I know it's like how do you bend that into inspirational, but it's one of those things you just got to remind yourself like when you're fearful of something, it's going to make you angry, and then that anger is going to make you hate something, and then that hate is eventually going to lead you down a path that you don't want to go. And so
Exactly.
guard your mind from those things. Guard your mind from the fear because fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to the dark side of the force. And so that's one of my favorite movie quotes of all time, right there.
Oh man,
Well,
that's pretty awesome.
I had to ask because I don't know if you recognize it, but you do say a lot of movie quotes and stuff
Oh
in
yeah,
your
oh
videos
yeah,
and stuff like that. So I got what is his favorite movie quote,
yeah.
and which mine is one of on the movie Independence Day at
Hmm.
the end where he's about to blow up the spaceship and he says, "Hello guys, I'm back."
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, no, I speak in movie quotes. Like you get around me and get in the boat with me, and most of the conversation we'll have throughout the day will be an intermingling of some movie quote in somewhere. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So I had to ask. I was like, that's got to be top priority to be
Yeah.
able to see
yep,
what it was. So,
that's awesome.
but we let's see. Michael Lindell says, "Shout out from the swamp." What's up, Michael?
What's going
But
on, Michael?
let's. How did you get started? We'll actually get into some fishing now.
Yep.
But how did you get into fishing? I mean, you grew up in East Tennessee, correct?
Yeah, yeah. So I was born and raised in Knoxville, Tennessee. Still live here, and I got into my entire childhood revolved around the outdoors. My dad was a consummate outdoorsman. He was a guy that you could hunt it, you could catch it, you could fish it out of a body of water. He went and did it. You know what I mean? And he was
Right.
always kind of that guy. But really, when I was born, and in my like early years, he concentrated a lot on bass fishing. I think the deer hunting lost the I don't know, maybe the appeal as much because deer hunting's work. I don't care how you
Right.
hash it out. I mean, the hunting fart's hard. The hunting fart. There you go. The hunting fart. The hunting part. The hunting part's real fun. But then when you actually kill the deer is when all the work starts. You got to
Oh
go.
yeah, you got
Yeah, it's so much to do,
yeah.
right? And so
Because that deer's not going towards your truck.
no,
I'll just
no.
let you know.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so I think that kind of all that hunting and just being cold and freezing his butt off and sitting in a tree stand and doing all that kind of lost his appeal. And he got really into fishing, which was something he always did. And so from the time I was big up enough to walk, I've had a fishing rod in my hand. I mean, it's all I've ever done, and I tell people all the
Yeah.
time, like, when I was in school and when I was young, yeah, I played sports, but one of my like most distinct memories was standing in the outfield during fall baseball. They have fall ball. And I was standing there
Right.
doing fall baseball and I'm looking around and I walked over to the fence. I said, Dad, he goes, yeah. I go, are the bass eating a spook right now in Cherokee? And he goes, yeah, son, they probably are. I said, do I have to play baseball anymore? He goes, well, you got to finish this season. Then after that, we can quit and you can go fishing. And I was like, all right. And that's what I wanted to do. And I mean, ever since then, man, that's all I've ever wanted to do. I love it. I mean, it's my passion. And I love exploration too. I mean, it's always one of those things. It's like, as a kid too, I grew up on a piece of property that had a creek running through it, and so me and my buddies were always knee deep, digging up snakes, digging up salamanders, digging up crawdads. I mean, there's something about that fascination for me, of not only catching the fish. I really enjoy catching the fish, but I also enjoy the adventure of going and looking and doing and touching something that I mean, dude, 90% of people aren't going to go do. 90% of
Yeah.
Right.
people are going to go to the most popular boat ramp, put it at the most popular spot, and go fishing. And I want to be the guy that goes into the middle of the woods somewhere and finds some little turnoff and puts my kayak in and floats down a creek, as well as be the guy, like Norman, as you've said and was awesome. I love the intro. Like try to be versatile as well as be able to put my boat in at the most popular boat ramp and go catch a fish too. I mean, both of those things I find total joy in. And so, yeah, I've been fishing since I was big up enough to walk, and it's all I've ever done and all I've ever wanted to do. And I
Right.
have a ton of fun doing it. So it's awesome.
Yeah. What is
Well,
your?
like
I was gonna say, what is your favorite lake, local lake around East Tennessee? And second part of the question would be, what is your favorite place to fish or favorite lake outside of your comfort zone or outside of your home body water?
Yeah, that's a hard question to answer, to be totally honest with you. Um, I live close to so many good lakes, and I fish all over the place all the time. Like people always ask me, like, "Do you fish this lake?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Well, how do you catch fish in May?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't fish there in May a lot. I go to like I go to all these, I go to wherever the fish are biting, and all these different lakes here in East Tennessee, whether you're talking Norris, Cherokee, or Douglas, like all of those are great springtime and winter lakes. Whereas, like fall and summer lakes are places like Watts Bar and Chickamauga and Loudon and those kinds of things. And so it just depends. I mean, it's really hard to answer the question of which one's my favorite or which one I go to the most or what I consider my home body of water. It's just a little bit of everything. And then plus you got all the creeks and rivers because like that's a whole nother thing, right? Like that's something that I've got really deep into and started to explore is all these different creeks and rivers. And I mean, you guys know you watch the videos or anybody that does like normally this time of year I'm in some little creek somewhere in my kayak trying to catch fish. And so yeah, I mean it's just anything at any given time. Where the fish are biting, that's where I want to be. That's my favorite place. As far as like being outside of my comfort zone or kind of going outside of my world here in East Tennessee, I mean I love going up north. Northern fishing is just out of bounds. It's ridiculous. Like if I tell people all the time, if you ever get a chance to go up north and to fish up north and to do the northern thing, Michigan, New York, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, that kind of stuff, it's silly. I mean, those fish are just they're dumb. They're dumb and they like to eat, and I like dumb fish that like to eat. And so yeah, the north would definitely be where it's at for me.
Yeah, and those
Well,
northern smallmouth are cut a little bit out of a different mold than the smallmouth we have down here in Tennessee too.
100%. They're completely different. Actually, fun fact, rabbit hole. There has been some genetics testing done that's starting to show that there is actually a genetic difference between northern smallmouth and what
really?
they're now calling
Really?
southern smallmouth. Yeah, because
Wow.
we've all caught them. You catch these smallmouth and they're like 20 inches long and they weigh like 3 pounds.
Yeah.
And you're like, how does that happen? Because if you caught that up, in Michigan, it would be
Oh yeah.
7 pounds. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's because literally, not only is it a forage thing and a growth thing and all that, but they're starting to do some genetics testing that's showing just like there's a Florida strain bass and a northern strain bass, there may be a northern or northern and southern strain smallmouth.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's
Yep.
interesting.
Now, are they getting bigger just because of the gobies and stuff there, or do they have more forage to be able to eat?
Oh yeah.
Or
Yeah.
then
So northern lakes, the north in general is kind of so I do a lot of podcasts with biologists, and I've had my buddy Shannon Gorman on, and he talks about relative weight and the relative weight scale. And so relative weight is a bass should be X pounds by X length, or by Y length.
Right.
So meaning like, if it's 12 inches long, it should be 1.5 pounds to be considered healthy or whatever. I forgot the exact, whatever. You could go back and watch our podcast or go to Chan's Instagram and go check that out. But up north, or anyway, so let me step back. That relative weight only occurs when a bass has enough food, correct? And so up north, there is so much food that a bass, like straight out of the egg, has so much to eat, and then will have so much to eat as it grows up and gets bigger, that those bass are hitting and exceeding relative weight with ease. And I mean, some of those lakes, like there's one lake that I went to with my buddy Ben Nowak, that we pull up to the lake and I walk out onto the dock and I look down, I go, oh, look, a crawdad. Oh, look, another crawdad. And then I kind of like looked, take a step back and look, and the whole bottom is literally moving because it's all crawdads. I mean, there's millions
crazy.
upon tens of millions of crawdads in this lake. And not only there are tens of millions of crawdads, but then there's also these thing called Cisco, which is like imagine like a fatty, oily, bigger blueback herring. And this lake is chock full of Cisco and crawdads. Well, the fish in this lake literally get so fat, so big, so fast that their eyeballs start literally like bulging out of their head. And it's just because they have so much to eat. And so it's the same thing with the Great Lakes. I mean, the Great Lakes are they're just giant sand bowls full of massive amounts of food that these fish can eat. And they just eat and eat and eat and eat. And they stay healthy and they stay big and they stay thick. And that's what produces these giant fish up there.
man, yeah, because I've always wondered what it, and I've always heard like the gobies and stuff like that
Yeah.
was up there, and the herons, the blueback heron, but I just didn't know that it was that abundant
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
that was up there.
Yeah, it's
So
crazy. And the gobies
that
are
is
nuts too. Like you go on the Great Lakes and you go on a rock vein, and I mean, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of gobies. Like you hit the trolling motor and they just scatter, and you see them like shoot across the bottom. And then not only is there gobies, but they have threadfin and gizzards and bluegills and perch. That's a whole nother food source that a lot of people don't consider. They got the Cisco. I mean, there's just so much food for them to eat. I mean, and then crawdads. I mean, there's billions of crawdads in the Great Lakes, and it's
right.
it's insane. The amount of food is truly insane for them to be able to eat up there.
Now, would a smallmouth, like a, let's say a northern smallmouth, would that be your top fish? That if you can only go catch one fish the rest of your life, what is the fish that you're going to catch?
Spotted bass. Spot.
Did that change after hitting Lanier?
No, it changed a while back. It changed after I kind of started to figure out some of the creeks and rivers around it. So obviously we got the Alabama bass. It's a problem. They're an invasive technically in Tennessee. And, I speak out both sides of my mouth because I hate to see them in lakes and rivers because it means they're going to breed out the smallmouth. I mean, it's a huge problem. We're decimating smallmouth populations with the Alabama bass, and people moving them around. It's a bad thing. But all at the same time, that's one of the funnest fish to catch in the whole entire world. And I mean, Lanier, it's just that is a prime example of what happens, the right, in like a good way, what happens when you put Alabama spots in somewhere. Those spots in that lake and
Right.
the blueback herring in that lake, it makes them dumb, easy to catch, and there's hundreds of thousands of them. So it's really fun. But nah, man, those Alabama spots and those spotted bass are a ton of fun, and even Kentucky spots, our native spots. A lot of these creeks and rivers around here are chocked full of those spotted bass, and they are mean and just fat and tubby. And like I've caught, a 12 to 14-inch spotted bass that'll eat a 6-inch coal shad like it's nothing. You know what I mean? And so I love them. That's my favorite fish to catch by far.
So, Michael Lindell says, if you could only throw one bait, what would it be?
Only one bait, what would it be? Oh, that's a good question. Like, so listen, let me answer this in two ways. If it would work 365 days a year, it would be a frog. Like, if I could catch them on a frog, I would literally I would throw a frog 24/7, 365 and catch them on a frog and never get tired of it. But if there's like one bait, and they say, all right, Alex, you're relegated to one bait for the rest of your life, it's probably going to have to be a jig. I mean, because when you really think about it, you can drag it, hop it, swim it, pop it off the bottom. You can fish it
Yeah.
deep. You can fish it shallow. You can fish it in cover. You can fish it. I mean, it's like the most versatile thing. You know what I mean? So
Right.
a jig, if they if they were like, all right, you only get one for the rest of your life, you got to catch fish. And then a frog, if it's like somebody waves a magic Harry Potter wand and they're like, fish 24/7, I'll be like, give me that frog.
That's it.
Yep.
So, was it a hard decision for you? Well, for people that may not know you, you were an elementary school teacher,
I was.
and was it a hard decision for you to make that leap into being a full, uh, like a like fishing and making content and stuff like that? Was that a hard decision to make, or?
I don't know if hard's the right word, right? I think it was a little nerve wracking, right? You're jumping into the unknown. You're taking the responsibility for a job and responsibility for yourself and the responsibility for the family that I'm building into my own hands. You know what I mean?
Right.
Even though you do that when you work at a job, anybody can get fired at any time. Any business can close down at any time. I mean, and so you kind of got to set that fear aside. But no, it wasn't that hard for me. And the reason it wasn't that hard is because, a lot of people probably know this by now and kind of know a little bit of my journey if they've kept up. But if not, my dad got diagnosed with cancer 3 years ago and unfortunately lost his battle last May. And, the day my dad got diagnosed with cancer was the day that I kind of decided, life is way too short to not go after a dream and to not do what I love and to not enjoy my life and do what I want to do. And so when that happened, quitting my job, it just didn't scare me. Like things don't scare me anymore like they used to. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
you got this fear of the unknown, and what is fear of the unknown? Like, yeah, I mean, it's healthy to have somewhat fear of the unknown. Yeah, I'm not saying be an idiot and go reckless abandon and go all in on Bitcoin or something like that. But what I am saying is that, like, what's the worst thing that could happen? You know what I mean? Like if
Yeah.
you got your affairs in order and you can make the money that you need to make to support your family and you can enjoy your life, then just go after it and go do it. I mean, Caleb Bell, our mutual friend, did the same thing. Bass Quest. I mean, he fell off that roof and it almost killed him. And Caleb woke up from that and he said, I'm not going to go get on a roof anymore. I'm going to go guide. And now he guides for a living and he's having a successful business. And so I think if all that being said, if you got a passion and you've got the means to make that passion your profession, then by all means go after it. And if you don't have the means, then understand life's short and work hard to go get the means to make it, to do it and enjoy life, and,
Yeah.
and so, life's just too short. And so I wouldn't say that it was intimidating or, even scary. It was one of those things that it was a lot of years of preparation and hard work and determination that I was able to position myself to make a jump. And when I made the jump, I landed on both feet and hit the ground running, and we've not slowed down. And so it's been great. I've been doing it for 3 full years now. We were just talking about that in the
Yeah.
green room. This will be coming up on my 4th year doing it, and it just keeps growing. It just keeps getting bigger. Alex Red Fishing brand just keeps growing. I keep getting to know people and growing relationships, and I'm just going to keep doing it. I'm going to ride this horse until it dies. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
when you stopped teaching and jumped into being a full-time fisherman, were you already doing kind of what you're doing now on the side and teaching? Did you already have a fan base already started, or did you jump in cold turkey and have to start from scratch?
No,
As
I've been building Alex Red Fishing. I mean, I started Alex Red Fishing in 2015. And so we're rolling up on my 10th year of doing this. I mean, I've been doing this for almost a decade, which is crazy too. I mean, think about that. But no, I'd been building Alex Red Fishing, and I think that's one thing that I always love to share with everybody is, if you do have a passion, understand that just because you have a passion doesn't mean it's going to get handed to you.
right.
I worked my ass off, for the lack of better terms. I just did. I mean, dude, I worked and worked. And I mean, it was staying up till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, editing videos, getting up at 6 o'clock to drive to work, working all day. And, as a teacher, a lot of people think, oh, you're a teacher. You get there at 8 and you leave at 3. That's not how it works. I normally would get there at, about an hour to hour and a half before my kids got there, unless I had to do some sort of like, bus duty or car duty or something like that. And sometimes I get there 2 or 3 hours before my kids got there. And normally I would stay 2 or 3 hours after my kids left, just preparing for the next day, grading papers and doing everything. And then I would immediately go home and, I'd kiss Bethany on the cheek. We'd eat some dinner and I'd spend some time with her. And then when it was time to go to bed, normally 10 or 11 o'clock, she goes to bed, goes to sleep. And then I would sit up and I would be editing videos, replying to emails, and doing all the things I needed to do to keep the Alex Red Fishing business going. And so realistically, I was working a full-time job as a teacher and a full-time job as a content creator, working 80, 90 hours a week and just working my ass off and doing everything I could to make the dream come true.
Right.
And, one of my favorite stories to tell is the companies I work with, X2 Batteries. One of the first calls I ever had with them, I was still, full-time teaching and all that, and still had a full-time job. And not that I don't have a full-time job now, but it's just a different aspect. But I got on the call with them. I said, listen, guys, I'm going to eat my dinner because I got to do this call and then get on another call, and I'm hungry, so I'm going to eat pizza while we do this call. Are you guys okay with that? And they were like, yeah, I guess. And I was like, all right, cool. That's all I needed to know. And that was actually like one of the things that stood out to them, that they were like, hey, we got to have this guy on the team because this dude is like, unapologetically himself. And I definitely was that, and I still am. And so, yeah, no, it was, I've been building Alex Red Fishing for a decade. Continues to build. It's been a great year of growth for me. Just past 82,000 subs on YouTube. We've got over 40,000 followers on Instagram, over 100,000 followers on TikTok. Podcast, just continues to grow, and it's just I keep on keeping on. It's just putting the content out there and doing what I love. Just being true to myself and not letting anything kind of get in the way of just
Yeah.
being unapologetically Alex Rudd.
Yep.
Right. And that's one thing that I noticed, and you've been that since day one.
Yeah.
And so it's not like, and we've met and out at ICAST and stuff like that, and the Alex Rudd that you get on the video is the Alex Rudd that you're going to get in person.
Oh, yeah.
And that's one thing that I really like about you, is because you don't two-face it at all.
Mm-mm.
And you just tell it how it is.
Mhm.
And if something sucks, you say it sucks. You don't.
Pretty much. Yep.
So, but I do want to. I seen a video, and which we talked about this earlier, that you were fishing with your dad, and this bait here has caught me no telling how many bass on chick.
Yeah.
And you done a video with this rage bug that you had it dipped in some chartreuse. You dipped it in chartreuse,
Yep.
and you were slaying it.
Yep.
And ever since I seen that video, I was like, I got to give it a shot. And you haven't failed me with it yet. I mean, even still, years down the road, it still catches fish, and it catches enough fish that I still don't tell people that I put the chartreuse on it.
Well, now,
Oh, yeah.
well, now you
But
did.
I do tell them
Everybody does.
Yeah, now
that
everybody does.
right. I do tell them that I got it from watching your videos and stuff like that, and so just because we do have YouTube channels and stuff like that, I've had people ask like, because we share everybody, because if we grow, we want everybody to grow.
Yeah.
It's how our mentality. And that's what I tell people is, like, with YouTube and stuff like that, is you'll see more people YouTubers fishing with other YouTubers, just because the camaraderie and stuff like that. And so I wanted to say, you need to go watch his videos, because definitely that bait right there has caught me. I guarantee you I've caught thousands of fish on that bait just because Alex put that on it.
That's awesome. That's cool to hear. Yeah, it's unusual. We talked about this in the green room. I was talking about. I was reading the book. It's called Knowing Bass. It's by a guy named Dr. Keith Jones, and Dr. Keith Jones helped to establish Spirit Lake, which is Berkeley's research lab for their baits. And what's really interesting about that book is he was talking about, bass see color. They've definitely determined that. And a bass sees reds and greens really, really good, and then its eyesight starts failing once you get into the blue spectrum. But one thing that a bass sees really, really well is contrast. So like a contrast between two colors. Now, even though they may not be able to see, actually they can't see purple, you know what I mean?
Right.
They see it like as a dark color, like almost like a person who's colorblind sees something as just like a dark gray. But that purple flake on that clear body is a really good contrast between two colors. And so even though the bait itself may not be a color that a bass can see, the contrast within itself is what actually gets the bass's attention. And so there's something to the fact that purple and that gray works together for those bass to see it really, really well. But then the chartreuse is really interesting, because what they proved was that bass actually see neon colors really well. So like anything that's like a neon, like a methylate orange or a chartreuse yellow or like a very, very bright lime green or like a really, really bright red color, that stands out to a bass really well. And so it's one of those things that combination of the contrast of that bait as well as the chartreuse on the tails is leading that bait to be super effective for you in some capacity, because the bass can see it and it's looking like something that they would expect would be food. And that's another thing that was really interesting about this book is that he said matching the hatch really isn't the best term to use. You know, it's a term that we all use. It's like, oh, match the hatch.
Yeah.
That's why I caught the fish. That's BS. That's like totally just, you need to get rid of that idea. Because a bass cannot distinguish whether something is real or not real, natural or unnatural. A bass only eats things that it expects to be food. So it wouldn't be match the hatch, it would be match the expectation. And so there's something about the way that that bait moves, the color, the the hydrosonic signature, which is the water that it displaces, that it hits all that bass's senses as something it would expect to be food, and that's why it eats it, which is fascinating, right? It's
It is.
fascinating.
That is.
So, to go down that kind of same train of thought, another color I've been playing with, I'm actually going to put a video out about it really, really soon, is Berkeley has a bait called the Pit Boss, and a Pit Boss is like their, flipping pitch and creature bait. They have a color called Perfection, and Perfection is like a muted yellowish, like orange, with a blue and black flake like top. And so it's these very you think blue and orange, very contrasting colors. Literally, they are like on the opposite ends of the spectrum of the color wheel, and and they are very different from each other. But that contrast in that bait, and something about the way that bait looks, the way that it moves, the hydrosonic signature, the scent technology, all of those things work together to be something that a bass would expect to be food. And I've been catching a bunch of fish on it. And so it's just a very interesting thought process to go through of like,
Yeah, that opens the world. I mean, just your idea, just kind. When you said that, I mean, it just blew my mind. Is that we grew up just like what you said. I mean, all we heard is match the hatch, match the hatch.
Yep.
And now hearing that, I mean, it kind of, I mean, that opens your mind up. Now it's like, all right, well, let's get those contrasting colors in, and let's see. I mean that smoke purple with the chartreuse. I mean, it works. So
absolutely, yeah. And there's something to it, right? I mean, and that's one thing that Keith Jones was kind of talking about is like, we get very caught up in like what works, what doesn't work, this color, that color, whatever. And he said one thing is just like, if it works, it's working for a reason. And he said in bass, there are times in certain scenarios where even the smallest detail can mean the difference between getting bites and not. And then there's times where it doesn't matter. Like, an imperfect bait in the right time and the right place, a bass is going to eat it. Like they're predatory, reactionary fish. They're going to eat. And then sometimes they're just not going to.
Yeah.
But his book really breaks. I mean, it's a fascinating book. It's one of those books that every night I lay down and read another chapter, and it's like I'll be about halfway through a chapter, and I've gone, about 42 times, because it's just like the discussion points and the things that he talks. I mean, it's like that perfection color I was just talking about. One of the main colors that stand out in shallow water the best are anything in the red spectrum: reds, oranges, and yellows. And they pop the brightest, especially in certain water conditions with certain, amounts of light penetrating the water. And so it would be a color that to us, it's like, it's just a color. It's kind of orange. It's kind of yellow. But to a bass in the world in which it lives and how it perceives the world, it could look like a damn glowing stop sign at the middle of the night. They're like, hey, I got to eat that. There's something about it. And it's just super fascinating. It's a super fascinating kind of thought experiment to go down and to talk about colors and to talk about all that. It's really, really cool.
And when you talk about that chartreuse, whether you're dipping it or however, or if it was coming that way, but talking about that chartreuse kind of struck me too, because, coming from Florida, of course, my forte is always, I'm always going to say flipping. Coming from Florida, flipping thick, heavy cover, but growing up in Florida fishing during the fall, winter time of the year, when the water temps start dropping, starts getting colder, Florida fish don't adapt as well to the Florida or in Florida to the cold as they do, say, as you travel out of the state of Florida. But I do a lot of flipping. One of our sponsor baits, which is the big stick and the 5-inch stick bait, which basically Senko style bait. But when it gets into that colder time of the year, what I'll do is flip whatever color I'm flipping, whether it be red bug, but make sure it has that chartreuse tip on it. You're always gonna see me flipping a chartreuse tip during that time of the year because when that bite gets real lethargic, and actually have a couple of videos talking about this too. When you flip that bait with that chartreuse tip on the tail down, of course, flipping is a reaction bite. The
Mm-hmm.
fish typically will hit the bait as it drops by. One sucking it's in their mouth, reacting to it as it goes by. When them bigger girls just lay on that bottom, just lethargic as hell, they actually have a reaction to that chartreuse. Versus you could flip till you're blue in the face with anything else, same bait without that chartreuse. As soon as you put that chartreuse on, when the fish are so lethargic, they actually have that reaction to that chartreuse. So when you start talking about that chartreuse tip, how it works, and the theory behind it, it's like, that's that kind of, no matter where you are, whether you're in Florida up here, that same theory works because from my experience doing it, I mean, they will react to that chartreuse when you're flipping when that chartreuse tip goes by versus without that tip on it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And
Yeah.
it's really interesting because you'll hear a lot of times like bass can't see chartreuse, which is also an untrue statement. Bass can't see certain shades of yellow.
Yeah,
Doesn't mean they can't not see chartreuse because
Right.
chartreuse falls within the neon set of colors. And those neons, even if a bass does perceive it as white, let's say they do, well, it's standing out.
yeah,
It's
Yeah.
popping, it's glowing, it has this iridescence to it. And that's one thing that this book talks about is like a bass views its environment almost like in a haze. Like their eyes are sophisticated enough to be able to, make out, details and do some pretty amazing things that even our eyes can't do. One thing that a bass little rabbit hole, and then I'll come back onto the tangent that we're on. A bass actually sees at 55 to 60 CFF, which means essentially, in layman's terms, that if a movie was shot at 60 frames per second, the bass could see each individual frame like it was flipping through a picture book. So we
Wow.
see it like 25 F or CFF, which means like if a movie is shot anything above 25 frames a second, that it just looks like one moving picture to us. And so that's how
Right.
we have movies is they
Right.
stitch it all together that fast. If a bass were to watch that movie, it literally could see each individual frame like it was looking at images as they passed. And so coming back to the whole chartreuse thing, you know, the speed at which a bass or bait drops, the color and all of that all lend into the fact that a bass's eye is more complicated than ours in some instances in its functions, but other instances it's not. And one instance is because we see through air, we see everything like with a crisp, sharp picture. Whereas a bass sees everything in almost kind of like a little bit of a blur or a haze. And so anything that pops in is contrasting to the world around it. It's neon, it has iridescence, it has glow in the water, is something that's going to be distinctly different than everything else around it to a bass and is going to cause more of a reaction strike or cause a bass attention to be lent to whatever that is. And again, that goes back to if a bass expects what that is as food, then he's going to eat it. And then even if he doesn't expect it as food, like you said, Norman, in a reactionary style bite, that flash is just enough to get that bass to actually eat that thing. And so
Right.
all that being said, I think we get way too caught up in the minutia of whether the bass actually sees something or not. I'm not worried about whether the bass can see it or not, or whether it's a color to the bass or not, because let me tell you something, the bass don't care. A bass isn't rationalizing color. He's going, that's yellow, I'm not going to eat it. It simply does the bass want to bite the thing that I'm throwing. Color indifference. I mean, I'll throw something that's poop brown if it gets bites, but it's
All right.
just one of those
Yep.
things is like, it's one of those things that like we've got to get our mind out of. Like a bass does not see the world like we do. They do not have rational thought like we do. They don't think at all. It's just an animal driven by instinct, but that instinct lives within a very set of like expectations and stimuli and life experience that causes the bass to eat things. And so worry about what the bass eat, not whether they can see it or not.
Right. Now, kind of going like, how far out do you think like a bass, like let's say you're throwing a spinner bait or a lipless crankbait, how far out do you think that they realize that that bait's coming by? Do you?
Yeah, so that book actually talked about that a little bit too. It's a loaded question, and it's a loaded question because there's so many factors that play into the the ability for the bass to actually perceive that or not. A
Right.
lot of it has to do with water clarity and then the sediment level that's in the water. So, like chocolate milk water with a bunch of dirt and particulate in that, the bass has to have things closer to it to be able to sense that it's actually there and to be able to see it and then go and eat it. Whereas water
Right.
that's like 60-foot visibility and gin clear like a northern lake, I mean, as soon as something touches the water, the bass knows it's
Right.
within its vicinity. I think
Right.
I was reading about the eye last night. A bass sees in essentially 180 degrees. So a bass has both a bifocal and I forgot what the other one is. Essentially like a fish eye. So like a bass
Right.
can see 180 degrees around its body and plus 180 degrees above its head. The only blind spot on a bass is on its belly. Bass can't see below its mouth. But then, too, a bass can see in front of its face. And so, when a bass gets close enough to something, it actually goes into binocular vision, which is how we see, and it can focus in on things and like break things down, or whether they want it or not. But
Right.
to go back to the question, does a bass see it? Yes, they'll see it if the water's clear, and they'll see it long before they feel it. But a lot of the times with spinner baits, bladed jigs, and things like that, it's a mingling of the inner ear, the swim bladder, and the lateral line all working together to paint like a mental picture, if you will, not to anthropomorphize the fish. I mean, again, they're not thinking, but it paints a picture enough for the bass to be able to make an instinctual decision of whether to try to track down whatever that is and kill it or
Right.
not. And it's just,
Right.
yeah. So yes, no, maybe. Like that's the best way to answer that question. It's all dependent on the
Right.
set of circumstances in which you're fishing and how the fish perceive things.
Right. So, I want to ask, what is your favorite fishing trip that you have ever been on?
Favorite fishing trip I've ever
It
been.
doesn't have to be freshwater. It could be saltwater or whatever. Just
Yeah, my favorite fishing trip I ever been on was the last trip I ever went on with my dad. I didn't realize at the time that it was going to be the last trip, and lucky for
right.
me, I got it all on video, and we got to go fishing, and we caught a lot of fish, and it was a great trip. That was my
Yeah.
favorite fishing trip I've ever been on, and it will be forever. Nothing will ever top that one because I
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't realize at the time, but it was the last trip I'd ever get to go with my dad, and it was the last time he'd ever get to step into the boat and have the strength to be able to do that. And so, yeah, that's my favorite fishing trip of all time.
Now,
Hands
kayak,
down.
kayak or bass boat? Would you rather be in the kayak or rather be in the bass boat?
Uh, it's like checkers and chess. I mean, that's like asking me whether you rather play checkers or chess. Both playing on the same board, but totally different games. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, I love my bass boat. I love the ease of being able to sit down, run point A to point B, go catch fish. I love being in my bass boat. I love my bass boat. I also love my kayak. I do love my bass boat more than I love my kayak just because it's my bass boat. It's a special boat and it's fun to be in my boat. But there are opportunities in my kayak that I cannot get in my boat, and there's opportunities in my boat I can't get in my kayak. And so I would never be able to give up one or the other because I love them both equally for what they are.
Yeah. Now, I've never
Yeah.
caught a fish out of a kayak before, but I can just imagine the vantage point you must have, especially if you have a giant bass on Feitner to the boat. The vantage point sitting down, kind of eye level with that bass when she comes out of the water must be really incredible.
Oh, dude, it's
From the
awesome.
view of the kayak. Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome, and to
Yeah.
me, a kayak has made me such a better angler. It's taught me patience. It's taught me that any given area has way more fish in it than you could ever think that it does, and that being really versatile and the ability to be able to break down water effectively in a small area is a huge, like key to being a better bass angler. And then plus casting angles and things like that. I've brought a lot of that into the bass world. I mean, I never knew how to do a left-handed, underhand roll cast until I got into a kayak, and I had to learn real quick so that I could put baits in
Yeah.
places I wanted them to go. And being in a kayak has taught me to be a better bass angler, absolutely. And you're right. You hook a fish in a kayak, you hook anything over about 3 pounds in a kayak, and it doesn't matter if you're in a Hobie PA-14 or a paddle kayak. You're going for a ride, and you're going to have some fun. Like it's awesome.
Well, I when I seen like you first started getting into a kayak and stuff like that, my first thing that I thought of is Alex likes it when it kind of gets a little crazy out on the water, and Alex likes to go from point A, point B, point C, everywhere. And I was like, so how is he going to do and deal with not being able to go as far or whatever? Which you answered it, saying that you realize now that you don't realize in a small area like how much fish are actually in that area.
Yep.
But to me, and that's one thing that I've learned. I had kayaks, and then I got a boat, and then I just sold my kayaks. But I wished I would have kept at least one of them. But I have realized with watching your YouTube videos and Gene's YouTube and stuff that being in a kayak, it helps you to have to, well, they're not right here. Well, now I got to go find, let's expand. You expand out a little bit in that area a lot better than what you would in a boat. Because if they're not in the area that you're wanting to fish, it's too easy to pull the trolling motor and hop in the seat and go 10 miles down the river.
I would think it almost makes you more slow down and just fish versus if you're in a bass boat, you're too eager to, to fish an area for 2 minutes, get up and go 5 miles down the lake to the next area. But being in a kayak where you don't have the mobility that you're going to have in a bass boat, as far as the wide spectrum of the lake, I could imagine it just makes you slow yourself down and just fish areas. And going back to what you said, it makes you realize there's fish in areas that you never thought fishing out of a bass boat that you catch fish out of, just because that kayak makes you fish. It makes you slow down and just keep the bait wet.
Yeah, I mean, there's been so many instances where I've found fish in my kayak and then been able to go back and catch them in my boat that I would have fished right over in my boat.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's like, that's the cool thing about the kayak is that, like you're right, it's slowed me down. It's made me more methodical in certain instances. And even though like in a kayak still, I'm like a squirrel on crack. I mean, I'm such a power fisherman. I'm so ADHD. I got to move. But even then, like I'm fishing areas just because I can't go by them fast. Like even though I've got the NK300 on my Hobie, and I mean that thing will go 6 miles an hour. I mean, still, as you're passing something at 6 versus 60, you look over at something, you think, wonder if there's a fish there. And then you pull over there and cast, and sure enough, there's a fish sitting there that you would have just blown right by if you were in your boat.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I don't know, man. I love it. I love the kayak. It has made me such a better angler. Like, I'm really, truly convinced, like, if people want to break a funk and they want to go try something new, go get a plastic boat, throw it in a creek, throw it in a river, go throw it somewhere. And that's another thing is a kayak has taught me about current fishing more than any other thing. I mean, like you can't take a bass boat up into some of these rivers around here. You're going to rip your lower unit off. You can only take a kayak. And it's taught me so much about fishing river current, how bass set up in rivers that then I've been able to apply in places I can take my bass boat. You know what I mean? And so, it's such a cool tool, and that's what it is. It's just a tool. It's a tool to catch fish, and it's a very affordable tool to catch fish.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, really cool.
So I want to, I'm going to ask you to rank in order of fishing trips.
Mm-hmm.
Cranking on Chick with Caleb. Smalley fishing with Benjamin.
Mm-hmm.
Lanier fishing on Lanier with Tyler, or live bait fishing with Caleb.
Live bait fishing with Caleb's number one, because that stuff is just out of bounds and stupid and just fun. I mean, like it's the only time I've ever caught 45 pounds of largemouth bass by myself. I don't care if people think it's cheating or not. That's one of the funnest, dude. I mean, like I held literally in one day. I held like 10 to 12 fish over 8 pounds. Like that's insane. So like, that's just crazy. Insane.
And a shout out.
He does it on a daily.
Yeah, I was gonna say shout out to Caleb Bell too at Bass Quest, his guide service, dude, and what he is doing on Chickamauga is just you just don't see that. He's lights out, lights out.
Yeah, and he's better.
He has proven.
Yeah,
he's proven that the big bass are still. People were talking at Chick that Chick don't have them big bass anymore, and he's proven. I mean, since last time I talked to him here a couple weeks ago, he said that he's caught over 50. Double digits just this year.
It's craziness.
Yeah.
Absolute craziness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then probably smallmouth with Ben. No. Yeah, smallmouth with Ben, just because those trips are just like there's always something like crazy and magical about those trips. You get to see something
Yeah.
in nature that you don't get to see anywhere else. I mean, the day that me and Ben had out on the water where we were literally watching bass physically swim out of deep water up into shallow water and start dusting out beds. And like it went from there's like 3 spawning fish to 300 spawning fish. And I mean, like literally at one point I caught a fish, was putting her back, and my lure was dangling over the boat, and another bass grabbed it while it was dangling over the side of the boat. While I have a 4-pounder in my hand and another 4-pounder grabs, it's just insane. Then probably Lanier and the spotted, but that's the most fun you'll have with your clothes on. That's just ridiculously stupid. I mean, you'll see them things come up and blow up, and then probably cranking with Caleb. And the reason I placed cranking with Caleb so low is because, like, it's just one of those things like that is super fun, but it's like, yeah, you can go do that. Like you can find that. You know what I mean? Like you can find that over and over and over again. I don't think I'll ever see bass dusting out beds again. You know what I mean? I don't know if I'll ever see a live bait day even with Caleb like I saw again. You know what I mean? And me and Caleb made some special memories with my dad as well, you know, doubling up on 9-pounders and doing all that kind of stuff. So it's just, dude, it's so much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, because that was, I can remember that video with you and Caleb cranking, and it was
stupid.
An hour video of nothing. Every cast was, I mean, there ain't no telling how many doubles y'all had on that, but it was every cast that y'all was smoking them.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that was, to me, that was one of my favorite videos that y'all have done. And, but speaking of videos, though, I do want to go into Lanier with you because y'all taught me something, and that's another reason why I enjoy your videos, because you don't try to hide if you're doing a technique or something like that. You at least try to explain it to where people that like me that needs pictures to be able to see what's going on. But y'all showed me, because I pretty much gave up on the Credge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I have fished it.
Mm-hmm.
I did not like how the reaction and stuff of how I was doing it.
Mm-hmm. But
y'all were doing something a little different than what I had even thought about doing. And y'all were smoking them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so that bait's interesting, right? I think a lot of people automatically assumed when it came out that it was a riser knockoff. You know, that this bait does what the riser does. It goes to the top, you know, you reel it right at the top, and it's like a wake bait, which it can do that, but that's not the purpose of which the bait was made for. And neither really was it made for, you know, specifically forward-facing sonar. You know, it was made in the thought process was like this can be used for forward-facing sonar, and it was optimized to be able to do that job really, really well. But it's a way more versatile bait than I think a lot of people think. And so, you know, the primary use for the Credge is obviously it's jerk backwards, right? Credge. That's, you flip it around, it says jerk. So everybody thinks, oh, it's a jerk bait. I need to fish it like a jerk bait, which it can be, right? You know, you sink it down to, you know, a piece of cover, a piece of structure, and you can just give it small pops. You can't just like crack it like a jerk bait. You know, a lot of people when they fish a jerk bait, you know, I'm one of these people, Caleb, I don't know about you guys, how you fish it, but I mean, you just crack the piss out of it. You know what I mean? You're wanting those big, hard darting action. With a Credge, you're not going to be able to get that. That's where you're going to hear a lot of people are like, the front hook is wrapping around the line. Well, it's because you're actually cracking it too hard, and you're treating it more like a jerk bait and less like a Credge. You know what I mean? Credge is really what it is. Right. And so if you're doing the thing where you're sinking it down past a brush pile, you know, or doing that kind of thing, you just want to give it small pops, just enough so it kind of comes up towards the surface, because that bait is made to go up towards the surface. Because one of the things that the Berkeley Lab, and this is also in knowing bass, and there's been a lot of bass science done around this, bass can recognize things on a horizontal, you know, aspect and a vertical aspect. They have a hard time with anything that goes like at angles. And so, like, you know, if a bait comes straight through the water column, they can see it. If it goes down through the water column, they can see it. If it goes up through the water column, they can see it. If it goes diagonal, then they kind of have trouble seeing that. And the reason for that is most of the things that they eat are either going to be heading towards the bottom or heading towards the top or heading away from them. You know what I mean? And so the credge is made and designed to move up and away from the fish. And that is also made and designed to look just like a fleeing bait fish. And so that's kind of the thought process behind that bait. Now, the way that we were fishing it is we were throwing it out to these, you know, these big schools of spotted bass and these big schools of fish that were hanging around these brush piles. And these fish hang around these brush piles. They wait for blueback herring to swim by. And when the blueback herring get close, they go bonkers for them and just go try to kill them. You know what I mean? And so what we were doing with it is we were throwing it out there and just reeling it at a real steady pace, not getting it up on top and waking it right at the top. That's not what we were wanting to do. We were wanting to keep it subsurface, you know, keep it about a foot, maybe 6 inches under the surface. And when you just get that steady reel, like on a 6-gear ratio reel, that credge is going to do two things. Number one, it's going to have a wobble. It's going to have a wobble just like a spy bait. It's going to do just like a spy bait would do, this number right here. And then it starts getting this like erratic hunting action going back and forth. And as you reel that thing along and it's doing this number, it looks just like a bait fish fleeing away from a fish. And then you get two of those things. You get a bait that's trying to work its way to the top and it's working across a horizontal axis. And so that thing's moving away from those fish. It's doing all this action. You got all this flash, all this roll. And that's what those fish are reacting to, and that's what they're going to, you know, eat it like. And I've been doing that not only with spots on Lanier, it also works really good in river current. You know, you can throw this thing on current seams and for smallmouth and then for largemouth as well. If you've got fish that are up, they're schooling, but they don't want to commit fully to a topwater, you can roll that thing by those fish and keep it like right at subsurface and get those fish to eat it. And another thing that you can do, and this is probably my favorite thing to do, is when you are doing like the forward-facing sonar thing, you know, of which it's optimized for, throw it out there, feed it line, sink it down to whatever you're, sink it down. Don't even twitch it. Just start reeling it. Just reel it right past it. And those fish, there's something about that reel and that weird hunting action that it has. And I mean, dude, they'll come completely freaking unglued on it. I mean, you guys were seeing with that Lanier video just how
that was it was crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, and they hit it so hard and with just so much reckless abandon. And the only other bait that I've seen that they do that with the same is like a spy bait. I mean, if you guys have ever played with a spy bait, anybody that's played with a spy bait, you know it has immense drawing power, and I think a lot of it just has to do with that roll. And the guy who actually designed the first spy bait, his name is David Swinside, he said it's called dynamic roll and dynamic flash. And that credge has that action, and the Berkeley guys, I mean, they tuned it and made it perfect to where you can just reel it at that steady speed, and it's going to do that flashy, weird hunting thing, and they're going to come unglued on it.
Right.
Yeah, we got John asked, what new bait from Berkeley that is coming out this next year that you are looking forward to?
Well, I can't talk much about what's coming out, but there is a bait coming out that, how do I say this without giving too much away? It's a bait that if you watch the Alex Rudd Fishing channel, you're very familiar with. And it's a bait that is it's a version of that bait. And I think that it's going to be absolutely killer. And I think that there's going to be a lot of fish caught on it, just like there's a lot of fish caught on the original one on the Alex Rudd Fishing channel. Now, as far as baits that are out now and that have been released at iCast, I'm really, really excited about the Clatter Crawl. I've been playing with it, flipping it, catching some fish on it. It's a really cool thing. They've molded little plastic discs into the claws that actually create a rattle when that bait falls, which is really, really cool. It's something different. I've not seen something like it. And then the +2 Stunna. I'm really excited about that one as well. I think that thing is going to kill during the winter because, you know, we all want a jerkbait that dives just a little bit deeper. At least I do. You know, I'm always finding those fish, they're in that 10 to 15 foot range. And from what I'm hearing is on 10-pound tests, they're getting the Stunna +2 down to 20 feet.
Right.
So super deep.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
So almost you can be able to like treat it like a crankbait and like work it down bluff walls and get it really deep before you bring it back up, which I think is going to get cracked. So.
I done this past winter. I really fell in love with that Berkeley stunner
Mm,
because I was able to take it below Chickamauga Dam on the Nickajack side
mm,
and destroy some smallmouth
mm-hmm.
with that, and to where they're suspended, maybe like I'd say like 12 to 15 foot, and being able to work that and just see them just migrate right up there to it, and
Mm-hmm.
it was phenomenal.
Yeah,
So
that's
I
awesome.
but um, let's see. Brenton says Berkeley or Rapala? Question mark.
Yeah, I mean, I think both companies, right? They have their pros and and they have their things that they're really really good at. I mean, obviously, Rapala is known for balsa wood and doing what they do there, and they make some phenomenal baits. But and obviously, I work with Berkeley, and it's one of the companies that I work with through my channel. But no rah bullshit when I say this. Berkeley is doing science on a level and doing bait development based on that science at a level that nobody else is touching in fishing. Nobody. It's just plain simple. Nobody else is touching. What they're doing at Spirit Lake truly is bass science. And it's not bass science to help them write a doctoral dissertation about why a bass's gills work a certain way or how they process food. They're doing bass science on how to get more bites, how to make fish hold on longer, and how to attract fish better so that we as anglers are more successful. That's
Right.
what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're doing things like the slobber knocker is a great example. There's a lot of research that's been done on the frequencies that bass can actually hear and feel. So a bass does have an ear. It does have the whole, the system of an ear, but it doesn't have an ear like we do. They don't have an external ear. They only have the inner ear. And that inner ear has a little, bone on the top of it that moves back and forth when vibrations hit it. And then those vibrations can also be picked up in their swim bladder as well and by their lateral line. And so there's a set of frequencies that a bass can hear and feel at. And outside of that frequency range, it becomes null and void to a bass. And so the dudes at Berkeley worked like through, I believe it was like 150 plus iterations of slobber knocker to make sure that slobber knocker works exactly within the range that a bass can feel and hear. And the only way that they did that was literally by tens of thousands of data points. And that's just slobber knocker. That doesn't count money
Yeah.
badger, max scent, power bait, all the new stuff that we've got coming out. It's just a plethora of different things that they're doing, and they're using actual real science to do it. And so I got to say Berkeley by a long shot, not just
Yeah.
because I work with them, but because I've actually got to see the real bass science that they do. And I mean, it is real deal data collection. Like the science that Berkeley has and Berkeley Labs has and Spirit Lake has would blow the doors off of any university level research project on bass across the country at any school, even the best in the whole entire world. Like it's insane.
Right. I know that Max scent has blown the doors off of fishing,
Mm.
uh, and I enjoy throwing it. And one thing that I've realized with throwing with the Max scent stuff, and uh, I've had a lot more chasers
Mm.
chasing after,
Hmm.
which I don't know if you've real or seen that as well. And one thing that I've noticed is like how like you'll have one and then another one's chasing it, and people think that it's trying to get like to the mouth and trying like especially trying to get it
Hmm.
get the bait from the mouth or whatever.
Hmm.
And I've realized this a couple times, that the bass isn't really going towards the mouth of it. They're going like towards the gill, and they're sucking from the like out of the gill of the fish that's caught.
Mm.
And I've had it to where they've pulled the worm or whatever through the gill,
Hmm.
and they are and the worm's just hanging out of the gill. Have you ever
Hmm.
seen that?
I've not seen that personally, but it's fascinating. I think there's two things to consider there. I think the first thing to consider is that you're fishing Chickamauga a lot. and Chickamauga has a lot of lampreys, and bass on Chickamauga eat lampreys. And I've had a 6-pounder hooked on Chickamauga and watched a 10-pounder eat a lamprey off its side. And I've had that happen more than once with a variety of different sizes of fish. I think the second thing that maybe be a factor there is, a lot of the scent technology, and so power bait is more of a taste technology. So bass do have taste buds. They actually have more advanced taste buds than we do. So the process of tasting and smelling for a bass, so like our olfactory system and our taste buds work kind of in conjunction. We smell things, and like we say, like I can smell it but almost taste it. That's because our olfactory system and our taste buds kind of work in conjunction. With a bass, it's two totally separate things. They actually aren't connected at all. The olfactory system in a bass, it connects directly to their brain. And so it's one of the many senses that they have that literally connects straight to the brain. Like they smell something, it is chemically, processed and goes straight to their brain, and then they make decisions based off that. Whereas with their taste, it's another chemoreceptor, just like their olfactory system is, their nose is. But it helps to really kind of, once the bait's in the fish's mouth, so it can process the bait before it enters their mouth, and then once it's in the mouth, determine whether they want to keep it in the mouth or they want to reject it. So all that being said, power bait is a taste technology, whereas Max Scent, it's a scent technology. You know what I mean? Now, Max Scent does have a taste component to it, which will make them hold on to it just like power bait does, but Max Scent is going to be mostly the scent technology. So that being said, those two things working together, I mean, when you're fighting a bass, there is somewhat of a chemical trail in the water that's coming off of that Max Scent. And those bass may be able to sense that enough, since they're close enough to that other bass, to be able to key in on some area that smell is the most predominant, which must be something to do with their gills. And it may just be where, as the fish is fighting, it's obviously flushing a lot of air through or a lot of water through its gills. And since that concentration's there, that's what they're trying to hit, is because that's there and that scent is strong enough to make them focus in on it. So interesting. You know what I mean? It's an interesting thought process. I have no idea to be certain, but it's definitely interesting to think about. And that's a cool observation that you made that I'm going to have to hold on to and see what happens when I start messing with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Cause the first time I just thought that it might have been a fluke or whatever, but I've had it happen 3 or 4 times that I've had that happen. And I was like, I think that that other bass is trying to suck it out of its mouth, the bait out of its mouth through its gills. Yeah. And, but I haven't talked to anybody else that has seen it or even noticed it, but you're out on the water just as much as we are, if not more than we are. And I was like, I had to ask.
Yeah, it's interesting. What's cool on that same kind of vein of thought as far as like taste goes, and this is just a fun fact because I read this in Knowing Bass, so I'm going to give Keith Jones his due. A bass has a set of taste buds outside of its mouth. They kind of focus around their lips, and their front of their face. And a bass has the ability that, if you were to put it in human terms, to be able to taste, like it would be like us being able to taste a hamburger across the kitchen before we actually put it into our mouth. That bass has that ability.
It's like me smelling these tacos that are cooking right now.
Yep. But imagine you don't smell them, you taste them. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, how crazy is that? So, yeah. But just cool fun fact.
Yeah. So, one thing that I like about your podcast, and because I think it gets personal feeling to it, is I love when you go to the Bearded Barn and all that, and you're out there in the barn and you're just sitting on the boat or whatever, just messing with the tackle. That's one of my favorite things that you do. So that's one thing I wanted to say. I enjoy your whole thing, but that's one thing, because I feel like it's more, you get more personal with it. It has that more personal feel.
I appreciate
with it. But another thing with your podcast that I really enjoy is the overrated, underrated.
Heck yeah. That's my favorite podcast to do, so I'm glad you like it.
So, with that being said, and with you on the podcast, I have to ask you some. I'm going to give you some baits, and you tell me, are they overrated or underrated?
Let's go. I love it.
All right. A blade bait. Are they overrated or underrated?
Man, I think they're underrated. I think they're really underrated. And
Yeah.
the reason I say that is because I've caught big fish on blade baits. Our buddy Caleb Bales caught some big fish on blade baits. My buddy Benjamin Nowak has absolutely wrecked their ass on blade baits. I
Yeah.
think that I think it's an old school bait. I think it's an old school technique. I think it's overlooked. I think a lot of
Yeah.
people, I think a lot of
And-
people, if they would take the time with it and learn how to really fish it well, that they could catch a lot of big fish on it.
Colin,
All
will,
year
Colin
round.
will definitely agree with you on that one too.
Yeah.
I've caught my biggest 3 fish bag was 21 pounds. And
And the biggest out of the 3 your dad knocked
and-
off at the boat.
well, no, I had a 4th one that was over 10 that my dad went to go net it, and so I had it at the boat. But like when the bass are ready to when they're done, they're not going to fight. They'll kind of roll up a little bit. Well, this one never did roll up, and then it decided that it was going to go up underneath the boat. My dad just reacted to it and just put the net down.
Yeah.
And when all you heard was a ting, and then the blade bait goes flying up past me. I think he was sick more than what I was. I kind of sat there for a minute, and then I was like, all right, let's go get another one. Because I already had 21 pounds in the bag.
Yeah.
And so I was like, let's just go. And but to me, that's one bait that you can fish all year round. That people mainly think that it's just a wintertime bait. And I've caught fish with it summertime, fall, spring.
Yep. They eat bait fish all year long.
Yeah.
All year. Yeah.
Yeah.
So next thing is the chick magnet.
That's Strike King's bait, right?
It is.
I'm gonna go adequately rated to a little overrated. I think there's a lot of flat side variants out there, right? There's a lot of people making flat sides. The chick magnet is a old design that's been around for a long, long time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, not to go down a rabbit hole of like knockoff baits or anything like that. And it's not a knockoff. I mean, it's uniquely their own thing, and they did their own thing with it. But I mean, Mimic Lures is a brand of lures that were made here in East Tennessee, made here in Knoxville by a couple guys named Stacy and Kelly. And my dad actually helped to sell them their first milling machine so that they could start mass producing their balsa crankbaits. I've got boxes of Mimic Lures. And the chick magnet looks just like a Mimic Lures balsa bait. You know what I mean? And so I think it's a good bait. I just think that there's better alternatives to that flat side in particular. But I think if you want to get into flat side baits, the Fritz side, and some of these other, plastic based balsa style crankbaits are great affordable options of getting into it, and you're not dropping like $45 for a bait that if you break off you're going to cry because it's handmade in somebody's garage with a paint job. But yeah, no, I think it's a good bait. I mean, I've not heard of a ton of people having a ton of success with it. So like I've heard more people talking about Fritz side, and then Ott's, Rapala that he has, and then handmade stuff. Then I have the chick magnet, and so that's kind of that's my toss up on it. You know what I mean?
Well, cause when I go and get a crankbait, first thing I'm doing is I'm yanking them trebles off,
especially Strike
King.
King.
Yeah.
And I worked with Strike King. Their treble hooks are terrible. Strike King fixed that. But anyway, go on.
And I've noticed that the chick magnet is very hook sensitive.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
So to me, I think they're I lean more towards the overrated than uh, than under, or even right there in the middle. But
Yeah,
just because I like to change the trebles, and
you got to be careful
I've
with that
seen
one.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like any bait like that. I mean, and that's why, like I say, like, Fritz side, Fusion 19s, you don't got to worry about them. They're fantastic hooks. And Rapala with Ott's, bait. Ott put his signature series hook on it. I forgot who he works with, I think he worked with
Uh,
VMC. And so,
VMC, yeah.
yeah, they put his signature hook on it. And so that's two baits that when you go to the store, pick up a Fritz side, pick up the other one. It's like those are both coming with good hooks. And then you got this, third one over here that's like, oh, it doesn't come with good hooks. And then not only does it not come with good hooks, but you got to be careful which ones you buy. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I
Right.
agree, man. I think a little overrated.
So, what about a bladed jig?
Extremely underrated. I don't even think that we've scratched the surface of the potential of what the bladed jig can do. I don't. Especially with as many new bladed jigs that hit the market every single year. I mean, obviously, Slobber Knocker, you guys have seen what it's been able to do on my channel. You guys know I'm a bladed
Right.
jig fiend. Like, I love them. I've got all kinds of different ones. I mean, I got jackhammers, I got Z-Mans, I got, the Thunder Crickets, I've got Slobber Knockers, I've got Japanese stuff you've never even heard of. And the Japanese, where they're not hindered by the fact that they can do direct head connections in Japan because the patent doesn't apply internationally, they're making crazy stuff too. And I mean, so yeah, I mean, I love it. Slobber Knockers is by far my favorite bladed jig that I've ever fished. There's that bait is beyond special, and so highly, highly underrated. Like, if you're not fishing some sort of bladed jig, you're missing out in so many different scenarios.
Oh yeah.
I mean, because you can go from thick cover to open water. There's all different kind of scenarios that a bladed jig will get smashed.
Yeah,
And
and
I agree with that Slobber Knocker. To me, how, like, when I put on a bladed jig from another company,
mhm,
and I want that bladed jig, as soon as I start cranking, I want to start feeling it vibrate.
mhm,
The Slobber Knocker to me, has the fastest gear to turn ratio for vibration.
mhm,
But one thing that I have found is, and I found this out by accident, is if you take a bobber stopper and put it on your line, and then when you have another company's bladed jig on, put that bobber stopper down down, like up on to where your knot is,
mhm.
and it's going to start vibrating a little sooner.
That's interesting. It's interesting. It must break the current or something in front of that bladed jig. That's interesting. And the one of the things that you're feeling with that activation is not only does it, it activates as quickly as any other, right? But
Right.
what you're feeling is the frequency. It has a lower frequency. It has a lower
Okay.
overall frequency than other bladed jigs. And so a lot of people are like, it doesn't knock as hard. Well, that's because it doesn't need to. Knocking hard doesn't mean anything. Knocking really, really hard could mean that it's probably knocking at a frequency that's either is too high for a bass to even feel or hear. And so the lower frequency is going to have, less of a, it's more, I always tell people, like, a slobber knocker is like you crank the bass up on a bladed jig. And that's because it is literally knocking at a lower frequency that the bass can feel and hear a lot better. And so,
Right.
just food for thought.
So I wonder, like, if we take a GoPro or something like that and stick it in the water and run a Slobber Knocker through, and then run, if we'll be able to hear that.
Yeah, you'd be able
Yeah.
to hear it.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd definitely hear the sound because, I mean, sound actually travels faster in water than it does on land.
Right.
Water is a great conductor of sound, and sound can travel, like, I think it's something crazy, like 60% further in water than it does on land. And, like,
Right.
there was a rabbit hole here, but one of the ways that we knew that the Russians were testing nuclear weapons is because submarines, like, halfway around the world, could hear as soon as the bomb went off under the water better than they could hear it on land. And, like, when they would launch a sub, halfway across the world, we would be able to pick it up because sound travels through water so much better. But yeah, no, you'd definitely be able to hear it. You'd be able to hear it. You'd be able to hear the sound difference, and there is a little bit of content out there, kind of showing the frequency differences of those two baits, and like a jackhammer versus a slobber knocker and all that kind of stuff. And so it's really interesting. And then the internal blade design too. That's a whole different. You're going to get a completely different knock and head frequency. I mean, you fish a slobber knocker any amount of time, you'll literally start wearing into the lead. And that's just literally the most direct connection you can get is running it straight through the center of that thing. You know what I mean? So super interesting.
Right. All right. What about a Chopo?
Oh God, so underrated. That's like the best bite in the whole entire world. I love a Chopo. Oh God, Chopo's so good. So many people too think it's like, they sleep on a Chopo. A Chopo is dangerous. It is such a dangerous bait. If you've got bass that are willing to chase, you've got wolf packs, you've got schooling bass, you've got large balls of bait fish, you got hard shade lines, those things with a Chopo just straight get bit. And another thing about a Chopo is, in my opinion, is way superior to a River Sea Whopper Plopper. And I mean, you guys know, you've been around the channel for a long time. I was fishing Whopper Plopper before Whopper Plopper was cool. You know what I mean? I was out there fishing that bait. And one of the things that we always did, I have a video of the channel on this, is we would put a ball bearing swivel in front of the Whopper Plopper because those things would want to spin. And the only way we could keep them from spinning was to put that ball barrel swivel in the front of it. Chopo, you don't have to do that because they actually weighted it properly. And then also they put that hard plastic tail on there, which makes it have a little bit different frequency, i.e. probably a frequency that a bass can hear a lot better. And it gives it just a little bit different sound. And I've said this on videos with Whopper Ploppers. You got to go through like 4 or 5 of them, but when you find a good one, you find a really good one, and you want it to just be like that. Well, with a Chopo, you get that every single time because of that hard plastic tail. The only downside is you got to be careful with the hard plastic tail because it will break. You smack it off something, it won't just, it snaps instead of bending like the Whopper Plopper does. But no, man, dude, a Chopo is, I think there's so many different scenarios that people don't fish a Chopo that they should be fishing a Chopo to get bites. And one scenario that I'll lay out for a lot of people is anytime the wind is blowing, if the wind gets to a point where the walking bait is ineffective, pick up a Chopo. And don't pick up a little one, pick up a big one. Pick up a 120 size Chopo and start casting it in all the same areas that you were getting those topwater bites. And you will get bit on it because that bait is able to cut through that wave, cut through that surface, cut through that surface disturbance, and to get those bass to come up and eat it. And some of the biggest fish that I've ever caught was fishing a Chopo in a lot of situations where people go, a topwater is going to be ineffective here. A Chopo was super effective there.
Right.
Yeah. Now, this is more or less of a question, and then we'll kind of go. I still got a couple more baits.
Okay.
When you're looking, because you said earlier, a frog, if there was a frog bite that you could have all year round, that'd be the one bait that you would want.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you're looking at a frog at, let's say, the local bait shop or Bass Pro or whatever. And it looks pretty, but they all have a white belly.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's to me, that's more appeasing to our eye than, because to me that you may have 10 frogs that has a white belly, but they're all different designs, and you have one frog.
Yep.
Because it's all white belly. Is that so? That's what I guess that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
Is that the same thing? How you look at it too? Because they don't see the top of the frog.
And real quick before you answer that, I'll do a little bit of an add-on to Colin's question. When you're trying to pick out the perfect frog to buy at the bait shop or to tie on, are you going to try to go more natural, or do you think natural matters when it comes to a frog? A little bit more of a natural color.
Yeah. So to answer that question first, I'll go back to what I said earlier. To a bass, it doesn't matter if it's natural or unnatural. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, yeah.
it's if they
Yeah.
anticipate it to be food. You know,
Right,
if
right.
they expect it to be food, then that's what they're gonna eat.
Right.
And I think
Right.
so many times, I think with frogs, get a black one, get a white one, and then get something, it's lack of a better term, it's kind of a natural color. You know what I mean? Something brown.
Right.
Now that all being said, my favorite combination is like a white belly with some sort of color on it. Some target color. Strike King makes, Berkeley makes one called I think it's called Honeydew. Let me pull this thing up. I'm pulling up Tackle Warehouse right now, but it's a shad color on top, black top, white belly, but it's got a bright red throat. And so that bright red throat creates almost like a target for those fish to want to hit. And so I think, again, belly color obviously matters because most likely that's what the fish are going to see. Now, that being said, when you learn how to walk the frog and you learn how to like treat the frog like a walking bait, there's a lot of roll in that body. And like, you'll notice like when I walk a frog or you walk a frog, that bait will roll up on its side.
Yeah.
And so I don't know sometimes if just the flash of those colors and the flash of that bait rolling up on its side will cause a bass to eat. But to kind of answer your question, if I had my rathers, I'm going to pick a bait I'm going to pick a frog that has some sort of target color on its belly, something for those fish to look at, that breaks up just a solid white or a solid black, something like a black and red, a orange and red, or an orange and black, or a orange and white, or a red and white, something just that those bass can target in on something that looks a little bit different. And so that's where I would have my rathers with a frog.
Right.
So, golly, I didn't realize we had you for almost an hour and a half.
Oh, you're not bothering me. You're good, man. I love it. I talk fishing all day with you boys.
So, what about the Magic Swimmer?
Magic Swimmer. The Magic Swimmer. Yeah, no, man. So underrated, overrated. We're still on that one.
Yeah.
So a Magic Swimmer back in the day was terrible because you could never keep them hooked on the freaking thing. And so Berkeley actually bought Sebile and got the Magic Swimmer and redesigned it, put some new upgraded hooks, new weighting system in it. And, it's one of those baits that I have caught a lot of stripers on. It's a bait that if you're fishing for stripers is a great bait, but it's a bait for me that I've still yet to catch a ton of bass on, and I'm still experimenting with it. I'm still playing with it. And so I'm going to go that for me, it is like adequately rated right now. It's a bait that I want to experiment with. I want to learn more, and I'm excited that Berkeley took it and kind of upgraded it and gave it a facelift a little bit because I think it's going to be a way more effective bait now of keeping fish hooked and keeping fish pinned. Right. And so I'm excited about it. I think I'm excited to see what kind of trouble I can get in with the Magic Swimmer.
Right, and that's what I'm right there with you. I don't think there's enough time on it right now.
Yeah. Dude, it's huge on herring lakes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you talk to anybody that's on a herring lake, dudes are fishing those on the herring lakes and have been for a long time. They catch a bunch of big fish on them. And for guys that are outside of that kind of herring world, I think there's applications for it. It's just figuring out what are those applications and then really diving deep on them and learning that bait for whatever application it needs to be.
Right. What about a glide bait?
Oh, I love this topic. I'll probably go piss some people off here. Overrated. I think it's overrated for me because it's like there's such a weird culture around swim bait fishing. Now, I don't care how people want to fish. I want people to have fun. That's all I care about, right? Like, I want people to have a positive experience in the water. But I think a lot of people, when you say glide bait, they think depth's 250. They think one bait, one rod, one reel, going and fishing for 10 days for one bite.
Right.
Glide baits are way more than that. You know what I mean? For me, I like to treat a glide bait like a tool. Like a 5 to 6 inch glide bait. That's about as big as I'm going to fish. Yeah, I'll go pick up the bigger ones. I'll go have fun. I'll go do that thing. But like a 5 to 6 inch glide bait, not only are you going to be able to get big bites, but you get more bites, and then you start to learn a lot about fish and kind of, that whole thing. And then with the rise of all these new chop glides, the glide bait has become like a tournament tool now for some of these guys, and there's been this big rise in popularity in it. And it's because a lot of guys have kind of realized what I just said. Downsize your glide baits, treat them like, a tool to go and catch fish and use it as a big bite getter, but also a bite getter in general. And so I think it's overrated in the sense that like everybody views it as like this magical thing that, you know, it's like you got to have some sort of magic to go and, you know, fish it, and like it's going to make fish do magical things. Yeah, it makes fish do weird things, but a lot of times bass will come look at it out of curiosity instead of to eat it, and so you're going to get way more heartbroken than you are catch fish on it. And
Oh
so,
yeah,
yeah,
that's true.
I mean, I'm going overrated just for the sense of like it's not as magical of a tool as everybody thinks it is, but it definitely is a tool that people need to consider. And in that aspect, it's a little underrated. You know what I mean? Like people need to kind of consider it as a tool to go catch fish. So yeah.
Yeah. What about a wacky rig over like a? Let's just do wacky rigs
I love wacky
in
rigs.
general.
Totally underrated. Totally underrated. So many big fish on a wacky rig. It's interesting. So a wacky rig is, you know, a lot of people think this is something that book that I'm reading discussed too. Almost never in a bass's life will a bass see a worm, ever. But what a bass does do and has a predisposition to eat is baits that are a certain length and a certain diameter. And it's because a bass, the way their eyes structured, the way they process sound, the way they process, you know, hydrosonic signatures through their lateral line, all of those different things play into whether a bass eats something or not. In a 5-inch wacky rig stick bait, whether it be a General, a Senko, whatever you want to buy, that 5-inch wacky rig stick bait falls perfectly into the length and girth and action and all of that gets the most bites out of a bass. And so I think that a 5-inch wacky rig stick bait, whatever brand it may be, is probably one of the most effective tools anywhere in the country for catching bass because it falls perfectly within the set of just expectations and, you know, stimuli that stimulates a bass to go and eat something. And it could be a bass that's this big or a bass that's that big. And I've caught everything from that big to that big on it. And it's just such an epic and awesome tool to go and do that with. So I'm going highly underrated.
Yeah, you're right. You're right on that, Alex. And you know, one thing I would love to sit down with the guy that first came up with the wacky rig for an hour and just be able to sit down with him and have a conversation on what his thought process was when he first came up with throwing. And it goes back to you know, kind of get matched in the hatch out of your train of thought.
Mhm.
But with that being said, I've never seen a bass that actually knows what a squid is. And when you think about it, when you throw a wacky rig, when you kind of work that rod tip, it's compressing and contracting like a squid would in salt water.
Yeah.
So I would love to be able to sit down with the guy that first invented or first came up with the wacky rig just to see what his thought process was when he says, I'm going to take this stick bait and
Yeah.
I'm going to put the hook through the middle of it and see what happens.
Yeah, me too. And I bet you anything that it was just a happy mistake or a happy accident. You know what I mean? Like it was just an epic accident that he went.
Yeah. Oh, guaranteed,
Stick
guaranteed.
this thing through here, going to throw it in here and see what happens. And then he caught fish on it. Like, well, hell, shit, that works. Let's go with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
He probably had a buddy on the boat with him saying, "I bet you can't stick that hook through the middle of it." And he said, "Hold my beer."
Watch this. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Real quick, while we've got right at 1,100 people watching this right now, Alex, can you tell people where they can get a hold of you to watch you and all that stuff?
Yeah, so it's Alex Rudd Fishing on everything. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, my podcast, anything that is associated with me is Alex Rudd Fishing, and you will see my ugly face in a drawn form. So it's Alex Rudd Fishing on everything. So yeah, if you want to go check out everything that I do, go to Alex Rudd Fishing. You guys can check it out there, and it's awesome.
And I've got the links in the description of everything all the platforms that we are live on right now. So
awesome.
Just click that link and it takes you to wherever Alex you want to go watch him at. So
awesome. Appreciate it. It's awesome.
No problem.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about what a couple of years ago you made or help design a crankbait.
Mm.
What is the process and that you're thinking of when you are designing like a crankbait and stuff?
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So designing any bait, I think is so like I don't know. My thought process is if it all changed. Like how do you design a bait? Like what is important when you design a bait? Why do we design baits? Well, the why is we want to get bites, right? We want
Right.
to catch more fish, and then I think from there it's like for me the process is always going to focus around like what can I do to make this more effective than everything else that exists. You know what I mean? And for
Right.
me with that particular project, obviously that was a project that we used to raise money for pediatric cancer and for the Pump Foundation. And for me, that was a process where I took an existing bait that had already been designed and I just added my colors to it. These
Right.
colors that I had had success on, these old school colors that you don't see anymore. And those were obviously limited run. When they were done and they were gone. But those same things, kind of apply to me. Is like I let dudes who do science over at Berkeley. I help with the process. I can, they send me baits and I tell them like this needs to be tweaked, this needs to be tweaked, this needs to be fixed. I mean, great example was Swamp Lord. That was a bait that I got to test. And we were having a problem with the weighting. When you would cast that frog, it would land on its top and you would have to twitch it a couple times to get it to flip back over. Okay. So that's immediate piece of feedback that I can give to them. And I can say, hey, we need to fix this because this is happening. And then they're able to fix it. You know what I mean? Or like if I skip it up under a dock and it wants to skip and wants to like tumble instead of skipping, again, that's a weighting issue. Like this is something that I noticed. And so really bait making and bait designing is about taking, an idea and obviously making that idea and trying to make something better. But a lot of it really comes down to the fine tuning of the process. How do you fine tune every little aspect of a bait and what it does and what it can do. So not only does it optimize the user experience while you're fishing, but then obviously the most important thing is get bites. And that's kind of what
Right.
we've been talking about all night. It's like, Berkeley designing things, whether it be colors or sounds or rattles or shapes or hydrosonic signatures or scents or whatever it is to optimize the amount of bites that we get. And so that's kind of my thought process there is just like, taking something and optimizing it to get the most bites that you possibly can.
Yeah. So another thing is I want to kind of go away from the baits and all that. Talk a little bit about your kayak.
Okay, let's talk about it.
What is the battery setup because you're limited of space?
Yes.
So what is the battery setup that you have on your kayak to make it more efficient for you?
So I run my motor is a 36 volt system. So I've got one 50 amp hour 36 volt X2 battery that runs my NK300, and then I have one 20 amp hour lithium that runs my Humminbird 9-inch Helix. I get about 13 to 14 hours of runtime out of that Helix off that 20 amp hour battery. And then I can get about 12 and a half to 13 miles at 100% with the NK300. And so, with the NK300, it's all about playing different speeds and different, like power percentages to kind of get the efficiency out of that motor while still getting the speed that you want. Right. And
Right.
then with the Helix, I mean, that literally is just all about like, what do you want? If you're going to run Mega Live and forward facing, obviously you're going to have a bigger battery. I mean, it just is
Right.
what it is. You're going to run double graphs. Guess what? That's just more pull. So you got to have more pull. But with my kayak, even though I have a really big built out Hobie, with the motor and with the graph, it's still a very simple setup compared to some people's. And so I'm still able to run a really simple battery setup to just power what I need to power and go. Yeah, I could bump it up, but I like what I got. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
all about playing with like weight and efficiency and time that you need. And like for the most part, like, you know, someone was like, why don't you put 236 volts in there so that you can switch them out and da 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 da? Because for the most part, I don't ever see myself pulling a Drew Gregory and running 24 miles up a river. That's just not the way that I fish. You know what I mean? And so, like,
Yeah.
my kayak is set up to fish how I like to fish, and it's set up for the efficiency of setting it up, getting in the water, and going and catching fish how I like to catch fish. Whereas Drew Gregory, if you were to ask him the same question, he's going to give you a completely different answer because the efficiency level that he needs to go and catch fish is completely different than mine, as well as the kayak itself. I mean, he's fishing a Shoaly, which he designed a small kayak. I've got a Hobie PA-14. I've got a Shoaly as well, and that Shoaly has nothing on it. Literally, it's just me and a paddle, you know. But that's for efficiency's sake and for what I'm using it for, which is small creeks and going and dragging that thing through the woods and through the mud. And so it's just about setting up for the efficiency of what you're doing.
Now, when you're rigging out a kayak, when you're running two batteries, how important is balancing the weight out? Are you running both batteries in the back, or do you have to
Yeah,
balance the
so
weight out
I'm keeping battery weight in the center.
in the center?
Yeah, center is where it's really at. Keeping it in the center, number one, is going to help you to have just a little bit more stability overall in the kayak. And so, like, I want all that weight centered. I'm in the center. The batteries need to be towards the center, you know, as close as you can get it. Like, my 36 volt sits directly behind my seat, pressed up right to the back of my seat in my splash well. And then my 20 amp, which, I mean, dude, that 20 amp, you're never going to notice that it's like 4.5 pounds. You know what I mean? So, like, it's literally like, if you're worried about 4.5 pounds in a kayak, don't boat flip a 4-pounder because you're going to, you know, like, that's a problem. So, like, at 36 volts, like, I think it's about 40-ish pounds. And so just having all that kind of weight as far front as you can is going to help that kayak to perform a little bit better, especially with that NK300. I mean, that motor has a tremendous amount of torque, like a ridiculous amount of torque. And so what actually slows that kayak down is the fact that it tries to pick up the front end so much that you start getting a lot of resistance and a lot of like drag where the front end comes up enough, and that's actually what slows the kayak down. And so, you know, playing with that weight and making sure everything's center and set, and like, you know, you could put more weight in the front. We'll have to keep the front end down with an NK300, which may give you a little bit more speed. But I mean, 6.1 miles an hour, I don't think you need much more speed in a kayak. I actually saw 7.1 the other day. Like, I took a lot of stuff out and like just let her eat, and I saw 7.1. So it's a hell of a motor. But yeah, to answer that question, is you kind of want all that weight more center and everything to be in the center of the kayak.
I got you.
So James says, I'm new to fishing. I cannot afford a boat. Would like to try to get into a kayak. Is there a place to where I can go and try out different kayaks?
Yeah. So I don't know where you're at, James. I don't know if you're local to kind of us or in the southeast or whatever. But Dugout Bait and Tackle is in Georgia. It's in Alpharetta, Georgia. And Jamie is who owns it, Jamie Cozen. He is who I work with in getting my kayaks. And they have all kinds of kayaks there that you can go test out. They actually have a pond on site that they can put any kayak into the water that you want to go test out. And then too, just like, you know, if you're not local to there, look at your local tackle shops. Or local kayak shops. A lot of your local shops will have like on the water days. And then too, just ask people. You know what I mean? Like, find a local kayak club, and you would be amazed how many of those dudes would let you go out on the water and test their kayak out and see if it fits your needs before you go and buy it. So the kayak community is awesome in that aspect, is they're super welcoming, just super nice guys all around. And that's one thing I love about it, is like everybody's there to help everybody out. But your local kayak shop, or a shop like, you know, the Dugout Bait and Tackle, is going to be your best bet for being able to test kayaks and see what you like and get into one before you drop, you know, anywhere from $1,000 to $6,000 on a plastic boat. You know, it's depending on what you want to get into.
Yeah, he says Macon, Georgia. So Alpharetta, that is probably going to be the closest to go to Dugout.
Yeah,
That's
go to
not
Dugout
too
Bait
far
and
from you.
Yeah, go to Dugout Bait and Tackle, ask for Jamie, and tell him Alex sent you, and they'll take care of you. He's an awesome dude, and they'll get you all set up with whatever fits within your budget and get you a kayak that's going to work for you.
So, Alex, I'm going to ask you one question, and then we have a question that we ask every guest that comes on, and Norman's going to ask that.
Awesome. Sounds good.
So, and then we're going to let you go. But if
Kill
you could
yellow
hold on,
jackets is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go pour gasoline in this yellow jacket hole and set them on fire where they stand.
yeah, you told me they lit you up.
Yeah, yeah.
So, what has been the craziest experience that you have had out on the water?
Oh man, I got a long list of them. I had a guy threaten to kill me one time. That was stressful. That's on YouTube. You can go watch that. I've seen
Then
people.
you had a dude that jumped into freezing cold water
That
on
was
you
the
in
guy
the
that
river.
threatened to kill me. Yeah, he got naked and jumped in the water.
Oh,
I've seen people doing it on the water. I've seen people get naked and go skinny dipping right in front of me. I've seen women without their tops on or without their bottoms on or both. I've seen that. I mean, I've had all kinds of crazy stuff, but one of the funniest is we were on a lake here in Tennessee. It was me, Ben Nowak, and Caleb Bell. You can ask Caleb about this. And these two people walked down on their dock. And I'm talking when they walk down their dock, they're like maybe 50 yards from us, like maybe. They strip down butt naked, jump in, swim around for like 1-2 minutes, walks back on the dock, grabs their clothes, and walks back up to their house, just butt naked. And I'm like, all right, well, that just happened. So, yeah, no.
Yeah.
I mean, people threaten to kill me, naked people. I've seen animals. I saw eagles one time. Ever seen an eagle do a death fall? And so,
Yeah.
like, they go up when they're breeding and they fall, and right before they hit the water, they split off. I've seen them do that. I mean, I've seen all kinds of stuff. I watched a black bear roll down a hill at Parksville one time. He lost his step and rolled like 50 feet down a hill. Yeah, that was pretty funny. Yeah, all kinds of stuff. I've seen all kinds of crazy stuff.
So, yeah, I know because when you're out on the water, there's something always crazy going
Always.
on. So I've asked Caleb that, and Caleb's just like you. He has, well, what story do you want to hear?
Yeah.
And
You want to hear about naked people? You want to hear about people threatening to kill me? Wildlife, ghosts? You tell me, and I'll tell you what I've seen.
So, Norman, let's take it away. It's been an hour and 46 minutes. So,
man,
let's
I
take
tell
it
you,
away.
tell you what, Alex, we appreciate it. This has been some really good stuff. I know I learned a lot of stuff just listening to you tonight that I wasn't aware of as well. But
Yeah.
anyway, we appreciate coming on, man. We had a blast talking to you.
Absolutely.
If you were to have one person on your boat, and this person could be passed away or still with us, but you could fish with this person for the day, who would that person be, and why would you want to fish with them?
My dad. Be my dad.
Yeah.
I just want to fish with him one more time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
get to experience that experience one more time and just ask
Yeah.
him. Just be. I mean, what do you say? I mean, I don't know. You ask him a bunch of questions, right? It's like, everybody says, when I get to heaven, I'm going to ask God all these questions. I don't know if you will. You know what I mean? I think maybe after the first little while, you might get a question in here or there. But, it's the same thing with my dad. It would just be awesome to be with him again and to go fishing with him. You know what I mean? And just talk to him, not about anything crazy, just life and what's going on. And, just experience life with him just one more day, on the water.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly, man.
yeah. That'd be the
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah, because I in the videos and stuff like that, go back and look, and you see you and your dad on the boat, or you and your dad just talking fishing and stuff like that. Just the pure joy that is in both of y'all's faces is, I mean, you can tell that both of y'all are just enjoying the time and moments and stuff that you have. And so
Oh yeah.
I knew that with asking that, I knew your answer was going to be.
I had a really
And,
good idea that was going to be your answer,
so-
Alex. And I would give anything to be able to spend one more day with my dad. My dad passed away in '94,
Yeah.
and of course, my dad was older. He had me at an older age, but yeah, like you, Alex, I would give anything to be able to spend one more day with my dad. So
Yep.
great answer.
Yep. Yeah, man. It's an interesting thing. You know what I mean? It's been an interesting thing, and I tell people all the time, like, grief and dealing with grief, and it's hard. And,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
guys especially, because I know it's probably mostly guys listening to this. Women, I'm not saying anything bad about you, but women are emotional beings. They're
Yeah.
emotional creatures. They're built different than
Yeah.
we are. We're wired different. You know what I mean? We're wired to be warriors and fighters and to grit our teeth and to keep going. But like anybody that's struggling with grief or struggling with depression or struggling with anything like that, just talk to somebody about it. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
okay to feel a feeling, and I had to learn how to do that after Dad passed away. And so, yeah, man, I just appreciate you guys having me on, giving me the platform to talk to some people and get to do what I love the most, which is talk to people about fishing and just get to hang out with cool folks like you. And so I appreciate
Yeah.
you guys as much as you appreciate me, if not a little bit more, just for hanging out with me and being.
Yeah.
I mean, awesome. I mean, you guys have obviously been a long time, followers of what I do as well. And I want to just let you guys know I appreciate it. And anybody that listens to this, it's like it does not go unheard. It does not go unseen. And when you guys watch the videos, share the videos, like the videos, comment on them, I love that. And that's what makes Alex Red Fishing Alex Red Fishing. And it would, I
Yeah.
get to live my dream because of that. And so appreciate you guys.
So, and another thing is, again, make sure you hit that link in the description because I'd like to get a phone call tomorrow or here in the next couple of weeks saying, "Dude, my channel just blew up. I got another 1,000 on it." And so
Let's go.
I
I
would
mean,
love to.
let's see what I got here. Hold on just one second. I got 82,500. So let's say 83,500 tomorrow. That'd be pretty cool.
That'd be perfect.
Yeah, I mean, because right now we're just a little bit over 1,000.
That's
So
crazy. Where all are you? So we're on YouTube, Facebook, where else?
we're on 5 channels on Facebook
Wow.
and 4 on YouTube.
That's cool.
And
That's
then also,
So,
what's that other one we're on?
Twitch.
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 That's
Yeah.
had a brain fry there, but we're on Twitch. as
But we haven't really seen the views and stuff from Twitch. I mean,
Yeah,
we
Twitch
may
is-
get
I think you got to get on there and play video games. I don't know. I played
Yeah.
with that just, but no, yeah. Everybody watching, listen, appreciate you guys. I mean, 1,000 people that's big stuff. That's a big deal, and so I
Yeah.
appreciate everybody tuning in and wanted to come hang out with me and talk to me and be here with us and do this. And appreciate you guys again. So this is really
Yeah.
really cool. Again, Alex Red Fishing for
Well,
everything. If you guys want to go check it out, so
it's simple.
Simple.
So, and we just need to get to where we come to Knoxville, or you come down here to Chick or Nickajack or Gunnersville or something like that, and go hop on the boat together and go
absolutely.
smash some fish.
That's what I was about to say.
Yeah.
After we get done here, again, like I told you, always annoy me. You just got to annoy me. Text me
Yeah.
and say, "Hey, do you want to go fishing this day?" And I will most likely be like, "Yeah, let's go fishing right now." I'm really, don't tempt me with a good time. I'll show up for
well.
it.
Oh, man.
Right. So, well, Alex, thank you again,
Yeah, thank you,
and
brother. Appreciate
everybody.
it.
Absolutely.
Thanks for sticking with us for so long. And again, go check out Alex's pages, and we'll hope to see you out on the water and live the passion, guys.
Live the passion, everybody.
Bye.